listening to Unfiltered with Muhammad Uncut, a podcast about personal growth and authentic leadership. If you're looking for tips on how to manage others, get ahead, and make your way up the corporate ladder, this is not the show for you. This podcast is about being of service to others, leading from the heart, and evolving into a better version of yourself. Each episode brings you motivated stories about unfiltered leadership and authentic leaders, those who involve others, use their influence to amplify diverse perspectives, and inspire teams to achieve collective results. If this sounds like you, keep listening. Welcome to the Unfiltered Podcast. And my guest, Steven Lowell. Welcome and thank you for being my unfiltered guest today. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you, Steven. As you've probably heard me talk on this podcast before, this show is all about inspiring others to become the best version of themselves. But we do that best when we can be the best leaders to our own self-transformation. So this show is really all about how we can become better human beings, better leaders in the workplaces, in the communities, in a household, just better people that can help others rise, use our influence to do that, and then really inspiring others by role modeling that behavior. So that's going to be the topic of our conversation today, Steven. And I'll give people a bit of background on who you are and how you are a servant leader to others. So Steven, you're a career coach and customer success manager with Find My Profession. You bring diverse background in media, insurance, hospitality, and professional services, as well as global experience in both the US, in Denmark, and other countries, including Colombia, Australia, and Germany. I'm excited to see how you're going to bring this success and this expertise to our podcast today. So welcome, and thank you once again for being my guest. Let me start by asking you the best sort of learnings that you've had in your experiences and in the various areas where you've been of service. What have you learned about leadership?
I've learned a lot about leadership from acting a bit as a servant to leader, and you know this started, I believe, from working in Denmark. I worked for a company that had me do a personality test, and what I had learned about working there was that they believed in matching personalities with personalities to become more productive, and then teaching by skill. So they even asked me right away, like, are you okay with taking a personality test? And I just said, sure, why not? And when I got the results of this test, I felt like I had just been opened up and read, you know, into my heart by this test. And I discovered, I said, you know, I may not be the leader that stands out in front and says, listen to me, but I am the leader who stands behind that person and says, this is what you have to do. You're not getting him. You have to get this. You have to understand this. You're not listening to this side enough. You have to listen to this person enough. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, I discovered almost a new career path for myself. It's a path of making leaders better leaders. And that came out of Denmark. And I think one of probably my favorite experience in doing this was helping my wife. She's a manager at a museum. She has a staff that at times expresses contempt for her, and she was upset about it because she felt she was trying. And I said to her one day, I said, you know what? I said, get out in front of this. You know, don't bring them all in together in some group. Find out who said what about you and don't attack them. Bring them into your office one at a time and have a heart-to-heart with them. And she did this. And I saw, and I really honestly think I made it up on the spot, to be honest with you. But it was something that felt like the right thing to do because I read the complaints about her and they sounded like they were reaching out for help. And she took the time to do it. It didn't take that long. And she has a solid, loyal staff now that feels they can go to her, that wants to perform for her. And, you know, and she enjoys her job so much more now because of it.
You know, Steven, what really resonated for me there is that sometimes when we think about leadership, we start looking, in the distance, and we see people in these ivory towers in the corner offices, and we forget that leadership really starts at home. It starts with our own behavior, how we role model behavior in our households, how we create transparency between who we are, the person we are in our personal lives, and how we show up at work. A lot of people, I believe, think that we need to have different personas. Certainly, there's situational leadership, and there's situational, how we show up in different situations. But if we're always struggling to be different people to different persons to different people, we're going to struggle, and we're going to lack the transparency that's going to be required to build trust. And it sounds like what you helped your wife do is to create that safe space where she could use transparency to build trust and to have those heart-to-hearts with the people that she was supporting. Because the only way that you could get rid of destructive conflict is to have open conversation around how you could address the issues that you're having, the challenges, and maybe even create some productive conflict, some creativity, and learn to do things better. So tell me about the personality assessments that you did. How would that open up a new learning to you? Because again, on this podcast, we talk about self-transformation, becoming a better person through self-awareness. What did you experience when you took that personality test, and how was it a gateway for you to learn more about yourself?
Well, I took a personality test that's called I think it was called Insights Profile, and it was the type of test that you may have seen before, where it asks the question. It almost seems like they're asking the same question over and over again, but just kind of rewording it. You have an okay time dealing with conflict at work. You hate it when workers create conflict in the workplace. They kind of do this kind of thing, and I take this thing and they even told me in Denmark, they said it was a gift because of what I was going to learn. And I found out what they meant. What happened is they opened up to the fact that you have four, types of personalities. You may have like your leader, your salesperson, your operations person, and your customer service person. And they showed me that I'm a hybrid of all four. And there is no direct correlation between all of one or none of the other. And it kind of made me feel a bit lost. But when they explained to me, they said, you have a difficult time with blaming other people for their failures. Every time someone else around you fails, you think it's your fault, even if it has nothing to do with you whatsoever. And they said, that makes you a very strong leader. And I explained, I said, I don't want to be a leader though. And then they started to explain, this is also something that makes you a very good leader from behind. And so they were explaining the hybrid nature of my personality, that I'm okay with serving anyone. I'm okay with selling something I believe in. I'm okay with making sure a process is efficient. And I'm okay with when the time comes and somebody has to right the ship, I'm okay with pushing somebody aside and saying, everyone, calm down. It's time to do this and get back on track. And they explain that's where I seem to shine most. I start reflecting and start thinking back of all my career experiences, and it's hitting me. I'm like, my goodness, it is. This is what I do. This is what, I went into this boss's office and I said, you have to let me sit on your couch because I'm having this moment with myself and I don't know what to do. And so this piece of paper you've shown me has just completely exposed me to myself. And I always thought I was something, and it got me. I really was shocked. And I think of, it's hard to explain it obviously, but I'm a people learner and a soft skills person. And I think of all my 25 years back of career experience working in Times Square, being in Times Square around the time that 9/11 happened, traveling to 4 different countries, so some of the crazy experiences I've had in different places. And I started to just realize, I said, I'm a person who loves to right the ship, but until then, I'll just kind of sit in the back and make everybody better. And I see leaders right now, because I was involved in tech companies in Silicon Alley in New York back in 2008, and I see leaders now who have gone so far, and I kind of just feel good. And I says, you know what, I had something to do with that. I was there to help them, not make a mistake. And that feels good.
That is a wonderful, incredibly giving gift that we can experience when we look and know that we've made an impact in the lives of others. And I think, that helps solidify what what I'm hearing from you about leadership. It's rarely, if ever, about us. It's always about others and what we can do. And, when you're talking about,
Right.
you want to get in there and right the ship, but you also know that people need to learn, people need to be hands-on, people need to grow. And if we're always jumping in and inserting ourselves, like, coming in like the helicopter, dropping down, fixing things, and then going away, that doesn't work. You need to inspire people. You need to be a role model and not role play that behavior. And I love the vulnerability, knowing that there's things, as you explained, like you're kind of flabbergasted sitting there on your boss's couch and say, hey, this was such an eye opener and heart opener, right? Because, when we learn about ourselves, and rarely these personality tests, because I work with them, I use them in my practice, I don't think we are so solid black or white. We are, as you said, we are a hybrid of very different personality types. We may have a tendency to display that, maybe the dominant more than, the person who wants to get things done, than the person who wants to sit back and make sure everything's right. So, but to your point, some people tend to be more of all. And, I use one in particular that comes to mind. It's called DISC. And it looks at the 4 different personality types. But the closer you are to the center, the more that you reflect and you can relate to others, because it's easier for you to empathize. And that brings me to empathy. And where do you feel that empathy has a role in our leadership style?
Empathy, I believe, plays a huge role, especially in today's world where there's so much communication via text and digital. You have to read beyond that. So you will see somebody text something to you, and you're not sure if it's sarcastic. You're not sure if it's a joke. You're not sure if it's. You have to have the empathy and to look at it and say, I understand this person. I understand something's wrong. And, people have track records of behavior. And if you pay attention to people long enough, you start to realize when a track record of their behavior is kind of drifted. And I've worked with some very high energy people who are chatting all the time and, in communication channels for work. And then suddenly one day they get quiet. And then their answers become very direct and sharp. And that's when I have to kind of take them aside and go, hey, is everything all right? You just don't seem like yourself. And it's really paying attention to their behavior. But the empathy pulls people out of that zone that they're in, of no one cares about what I'm going through. No one knows what's going on. This is all about me. I have to be me. I have to, we sometimes put up our hands and we say, I'm going to fight through this. And sometimes we just flat out take all our anger out on every other people. And a leader has to be able to not take that personally and show empathy. Take them and say, what happened? Is everything okay? Even if somebody bites back and says, yes, leave me alone, you can simply go, okay, I just wanted to check in with you and make sure that everything was
right.
Okay.
We don't always have to have the answers, and seldom do we have the solutions, but, it's letting another person know that, we're here, and, we're here to listen, and we're here to feel with you and try to understand, even maybe when we can't. So, that really resonates with me, because I think the best that we can do as leaders is to lean in and be curious and try to understand the situation that people are in, because they may not even understand it, but in listening and supporting them, we can probably help them come out of that dark place and help them see some light. And at the end of the day, you mentioned earlier, leadership is about having those heart-to-heart talks. And even when you feel that anger or frustration coming at you like knives, it's easy to sit back and become defensive. But this is where you have to realize that there's a reason something is happening. There's a reason these conversations or these words are being aimed at me. And if you recognize people are coming from a place of hurt, a place of need, you can shift your style to again lean in and give them what they need. Let me ask you, Steven, you mentioned you were in Times Square. I mean, what a great place to learn about people if you're going to see people, right? And this was a time of 9/11. How do you think our lives have changed. And I know this, many things have changed since, 9/11. But in terms of leaders needing to be more heart-centered, how do you think these tragedies, things that happen here on, near us, because in North America, in the Western world, we're isolated. I think we're fortunate, and we don't have to deal. And today's Veterans Day today, in the States, and Remembrance Day here in Canada. So I think it's right for us to think about those who have sacrificed their lives and their dreams so that we can live our lives and fulfill our dreams. So, my utmost respect for the women and men who have done that. But life has changed for us. And I think when we look at the luxuries that we have in our countries here, we're not exposed to this sort of anger, fear on a regular basis. How do you think, though, things like 9/11 and further tragedies that happen locally have caused leaders to react differently or respond differently in their leadership style?
I think it's there are styles of leadership that people hope to see when such tragedies come about. And I remember back then that I wanted somebody who would plant their flag on the ground and just go after everybody who was evil. And I wanted somebody who was always stern and, and just seemed impenetrable, that was endlessly optimistic, that said these powerful things that appealed to my hatred. And I can say that reflecting now. But what I think has changed is that style of leadership is no longer as welcomed, because we've become more sensitive and more intelligent as a society, where we expect more practical responses, more responses that are well-rounded, that understand that if things get better for everybody, they get better for everybody.
So true.
I don't think that, see, what I remember a lot about 9/11 was that, it was a patriotic moment, to be in Times Square and have everybody. I worked at a theme restaurant, which was big back then, corporate restaurants back then, and everybody in one night being in a restaurant saluting the flag, and but there was another part too, though, that years later I kind of realized we overreacted, and one of my stories out of that time period was taking a cab from Newark Airport to my apartment, and the cab driver was Muslim, and he was afraid to take me home. And I remember thinking putting my arm on his back, and I said, "You got nothing to worry about. You got nothing to worry about." And he looked at me and he said, "Yes, I do." And that's what made me think something's gotten wrong off the track here. And I started to doubt that style of shoot first, ask questions later leadership. And I started to look more towards, let's do something intelligent. Let's think and then choose and then act. Let's not act and then think about the results and then choose to be different.
And then maybe even feel a bit of remorse because maybe our actions were not ones that we wanted to take or should have taken. And when I hear you say intelligent, what comes to mind is emotional intelligence, because what I'm hearing from you is as leaders, and here, again, I remind the listener, when we're saying leader, we're not just talking about that person in the corner office. We're talking about a person who role models behaviors that inspire us to become better human beings. Because when we can become those better human beings, whether it's in our home, in our communities, in our workplaces, we are going to inspire people to do their jobs better, to be, to be better. And that's going to help us all feel the need that we can be better and stronger together. And at a time right now when we're looking at what's happening in the United States, right? So we're just coming out of elections and very divisive rhetoric that we've been living through for the past. I say we, even though here in Canada, we feel it. We were getting ready to react to what was going on. But, amidst what's happening with this global pandemic and the COVID pandemic, there's a lot going on, and leadership especially in times of crisis, we look to our leaders, we look to people who are inspiring us to be strong, right? Like you mentioned earlier, you were looking for that pillar of confidence, that stern person who is going to help you, get out of where you were. And I think we can still have that, but it doesn't have to be strong in ignorance. It can be strong in humanity and recognizing that we are all in this together, and we need to continue coming together. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's a really powerful story, and I mean that resonates with me because I talk about it often. I talk about it as a Muslim, as a person from a different country, an immigrant. I deal with that daily, and to think that that doesn't impact me with a name like Muhammad, well, I would tell people it impacts me every day. But you live with it, and you become the bridge to help people cross that isthmus of unknowing and ignorance. And people can choose to take ignorance and turn it into fear and hatred, or to turn it into an opportunity to learn and to create some love. And it reminds me of the story you shared with your wife. She could have gotten defensive and decided to walk away, and as a person in power, a position of power, a manager, she could have been vindictive towards the people that work with her, but she chose to sit down and have that heart to heart. And that's what leadership is about. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Let me ask you, Steven, what has been one of your favorite books and one that has inspired you to be that better person, be a better leader for the people you work with?
This may surprise you. The one book that hit me a long time ago was Catcher in the Rye.
Oh yeah.
The story of this guy, this young boy who's kind of on his own and trying to figure out the
J.D.
world.
Salinger, right?
Yes, J.D. Salinger. Yeah. And the story of how he travels around the country and how he's really trying to discover himself. And he has these interactions with people that seem, for when the book was written, it seemed kind of crazy. But if you've lived in major cities and then traveled a lot, you realize it's not that crazy to come across certain situations. And that's just that book of a person trying to discover himself and be a better person. It became my favorite book. And it actually, shortly after I graduated college, it became something I did. I went around the country to 49 of the 50 US states.
Wow.
doing a show.
Amazing.
I drove around with a diverse group of actors of all genders and sexual preferences. We went to different high schools and we performed a play that was written by kids who were in a drug rehab center and addicted to drugs. And we went to high schools in each individual city around the US in each different state.
Amazing.
And, it teaches you so much about people in general, that everything we think that makes us different is actually what makes us the very same. And, it's an experience that even 25 years later, I still think about, because really the country and people have not changed that much. Those people who were in high school and meeting me are now, they're now adults and they have kids, but they're going to remember that day, and they were the people I met all different races, all different, political beliefs, all different, you name it. It was, I could tell you, if this podcast went 4 hours, I could tell you a story for 4 hours. I won't do that, but it really, you think about it though. And I mean, I think about that time period, and I said, it taught me so much. It really did. And it led to me eventually becoming a writer, and
amazing.
And eventually going down that road of, what, I think I want to serve people. I think I can do a lot more that way.
Amazing. The stories and the environment may change, but the narrative doesn't very much. I mean, to your point, we still go through crises. We still, go through self-transformation, and we're still learning and growing. It reminds me of, I have a colleague on on LinkedIn platform. His name is Jay Andrews, who's also been a guest of mine on here. And yesterday he had a post about To Kill a Mockingbird. And he showed how that book, just like the J.D. Salinger, because I think it's the same time, the same era. And he's talking about how the cover of that book may have changed, but the story itself remains the same. And the way that we interpret the story today based on our environment may be a bit different, but the takeaway is probably not that much different, and it comes back to, I say often that we may come from many different backgrounds, but we form a nation, and that's humankind, and we are stronger because of our differences, not in spite of them. So it's, and to your point, that the more you look at what makes us different, the more you realize that we're all the same. We're cut from the same tapestry, and we create this mosaic of different colors and beliefs and ethnicities and religions and faiths and different ways we love, and none of those are bad. They're all good and they're all okay. And we have to show up to say that we're enough. I am enough. Each one of us is enough, and embrace that totality and being human together. So I really appreciate that story, J.D. Salinger. I think I read that in grade 9. Yeah. Yeah. Catcher in the Rye.
Yes, I read I think I read that in my freshman year of college.
Amazing.
And had that vision of just making that same journey. And that was it's still one.
And the resonance is still there, isn't it? The resonance of that book and how it impacted you. Maybe I believe you interpret it a little differently, each year and each time you read it. Right. That's the great thing about a book, right?
Yeah. It's it was hard. The first time I read it, it was hard for me to believe that the book was banned at one point. And J.D. Salinger took a lot of heat in public for writing it, and I didn't exactly see why. I thought it was actually something that was relevant to the way that life is so confusing, and we're all on this journey to figure out.
Well, I think it's the fear again, right? What we don't know, we can either embrace or we can turn our back upon it, right? And I think when people aren't ready to embrace it, that's what they do, is they react in fear, and it's the fear of the unknown. But to what you said earlier, is to recognize that there's a learning opportunity. There's an opportunity to become a bridge of learning. Steven, this is where I get to the point of the podcast where I ask you to share something that you've learned from your life with the listeners. I call it the Unfiltered Thought of the Week. If there's something that you could share to help them become a better leader, a better person, what would that be?
I would say take risks and challenge popular opinion. And I use that. I use the example of one of my favorite jobs ever when I went to work in Colombia. But this was in 2007. There was still an issue with guerrillas, FARC guerrillas, I think it was, down there, and they still had some political strife. And I thought to myself, because there were travel warnings on websites and said don't go there, and there was this job opportunity coming up, and it sounded like an amazing opportunity, and I love people anyway. So learning about people in a new country was amazing. And everybody said, oh, Bogota this, Bogota, Colombia that, it's scary, it's this. And even when I was interviewed, the company CEO asked me, he said, how do you feel about traveling to Bogota? And I knew from the tone of his voice, I said, this is a deal breaker question. And I said, why not? Let's do it. And it was really like just that fast, and said, let's challenge this. And when I went there, I saw nothing like what was described at all. Nothing like on the travel warning websites. I saw a beautiful culture, beautiful people, family.
Beautiful city.
Yes, beautiful city. Family first oriented, which I love personally. And they were big on letting me know, we're not like what you see on TV. We're not like this. They cared about making their country better. And if you look at them now, they're one of the biggest tech hubs in the entire world, and they've got a great future. When only 13 years ago, they were afraid that they were viewed as a third world country. And I went there and I said, you guys have this backwards. I said, you've got your stuff together. You know what you're doing. Trust me. You don't understand because you haven't been where I've been. And that's when we started to actually have people come to the US, and I went to Bogota. So we did team integration. But if I had listened to the opinions of things that I saw on travel websites and what relatives said to me, I never would have had that opportunity. I would have blown it because I didn't take the risk, because I didn't challenge popular opinion.
Right. I often say to my children, sorry, Go ahead.
I was going to say, and I know that's when you're a parent, it's scary to say something like that because you don't want your child to go and do something insane. So I know people were worried about me, but it has to be let's just call it has to be an educated risk or a calculated.
You read my mind. You're right. Yes. Because the kids will always say to you, well, you told me you did this when you were younger, right? It's like, yeah, I did it, but you can't do it now. It's tough as a parent to do that. But I think that's where we have to challenge our own fears as well, right? So thank you, Steve. That's a beautiful story. And, that story is no different today than probably was 13 years ago, or even when we were asking ourselves, do the Russians love their children too? When we were in the Cold War and Sting was singing that song, he was just reminding us we always have to find the other, and rather than embrace the other, we have to live in fear. And I think it's time. And one of the things that I hope to do on this podcast and in spreading that message is for us as leaders to embrace our differences and to create those bridges where we can get to know others and help them rise. And that's, at the end of the day, that's leadership. Well, thank you for being my unfiltered guest today. Thank you for sharing your heart, warming stories. And I wish you the best. And let's keep in touch.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
All the best to you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Unfiltered, the show about authentic leadership and personal growth. Like what you heard? Click subscribe, share it, and tell a friend about it. And don't forget to leave a rating.